The rain fell in angry sheets over Willow Creek, turning the cracked sidewalks into a patchwork of muddy rivers. Streetlights flickered in the downpour, casting a dull, trembling glow over the nearly deserted town square. Stores had shuttered early, neon signs buzzing weakly in their windows, as if even they were too tired to fight the storm. Allison Turner stood beneath the battered awning of Mason's Diner, shivering despite her thick denim jacket. Her sneakers were soaked through, squelching unpleasantly every time she shifted her weight. She hugged a battered suitcase to her chest like a lifeline, a crumpled manila folder tucked under one arm, eviction papers peeking out from its torn edges. The ink had run from the rain, but the word "notice" was still painfully legible. A year ago, she had been Willow Creek's bright light, the ambitious small-town girl who had dared to open her own coffee house with dreams of expansion, of making something permanent in a place where most people just drifted. A year ago, she had a fiancé who spoke about forever over slices of peach pie at the diner counter. Now she had none of it. A bad economy, a few missed payments, one cruel betrayal, and it had all fallen apart like a house of cards. Lightning tore across the sky, and instinctively, Allison flinched. She glanced around the empty streets, the weight of the night pressing in on her. Everything familiar had turned alien. Even Mason's Diner, with its faded Coca-Cola signs and vinyl booths she once laughed in, felt like enemy territory now. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but pride held her rooted to the sidewalk. She didn't want charity. She didn't want anyone's pitying looks or whispered conversations behind cupped hands at Sunday service. But as the rain poured harder, soaking through her jacket, pride became a luxury she couldn't afford. With a shaky breath, Allison pushed open the diner's door, the brass bell overhead jingling half-heartedly. Inside, the diner was a time capsule, warm yellow light, cracked leather seats, the low hum of an old jukebox playing a country song she vaguely remembered from high school. The air smelled like strong coffee, sizzling bacon, and something sweet baking in the back. Homey, safe. And yet, she felt like a ghost drifting through a place that had forgotten her. Behind the counter stood an older woman, wiping down the surface with a practiced hand. Her silver hair was pulled into a loose bun under a pink mason's cap, and her eyes were sharp but kind. Her name tag read, Maggie. Maggie glanced up, instantly taking in Allison's soaked clothes, pale face, and the tremble she tried and failed to hide. "Sweetheart, you look like you wrestled a hurricane and lost," Maggie said, her voice a comforting blend of humor and concern. She nodded toward the nearest stool. "Sit down before you fall down." Allison hesitated. The diner was almost empty, save for a man at the far end of the counter. Mid-30s, lean build, wearing a weathered Carhartt jacket and mud-caked boots. He nursed a cup of coffee, seemingly lost in his own world. He glanced up briefly, gave her a small nod, then returned to his thoughts. Feeling the last shreds of dignity dissolve, Allison slid onto the stool, setting her suitcase at her feet. She pulled the manila folder closer, as if she could shield herself with it. Without asking, Maggie poured her a steaming cup of coffee and slid a plate toward her with a grilled cheese sandwich and a pile of golden fries. "On the house," Maggie said firmly when Allison opened her mouth to protest. "You can pay me back by staying dry and breathing." The smell alone almost broke her. Allison wrapped her hands around the chipped ceramic mug, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. The first sip burned her tongue slightly, but sent a shiver of life back through her limbs. As she picked at the sandwich, she couldn't help but notice the man at the end of the counter again. He seemed familiar, not his face exactly, but the way he sat, heavy with something invisible, grief maybe, or regret. Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business, but right now Allison felt like she didn't know anyone at all, including herself. The storm raged outside, a furious symphony of thunder and wind rattling the diner's windows. Inside, the world was a tiny island of light and warmth. For the first time in months, Allison let herself breathe, really breathe, and the realization of everything she had lost hit her like a freight train. The coffee blurred in her vision as tears threatened. She blinked them back, fiercely. She would not cry here, not in front of these strangers. "First time in Willow Creek?" Maggie asked gently, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Allison shook her head. "Born and raised," she croaked. Her voice sounded foreign, even to her own ears, brittle and rough from disuse. Just had a rough year. Maggie nodded as if that explained everything. Maybe in a town like this, it did. Well, hon, you're still breathing, and around here, that means you're still fighting. Those simple words struck a chord deep inside Allison, one she didn't realize was still there. The stubborn, defiant chord that had made her try to build a business, to believe in love, to think she could make her mark. Maybe it wasn't dead after all. The man at the end of the counter finished his coffee and stood, dropping a few bills on the counter. As he passed her, he offered a quiet, rough-voiced good luck. Then he disappeared into the storm without another glance. She would later learn his name. Sam Carter. And though she didn't know it yet, this rainy night at Mason's diner, this night when everything had collapsed, was the night her life would truly begin again. The storm outside would pass, and so would the storm inside her. But first, she had to survive the night. The next morning broke gray and cold over Willow Creek, the storm having blown itself out overnight, leaving behind a town soaked and battered but still standing, much like Allison herself. She woke up in the corner booth of Mason's diner, the red leather sticky against her cheek, the heavy smell of bacon and cinnamon rolls pulling her out of restless dreams. Maggie had draped a faded quilt over her at some point during the night, and beside her sat a steaming mug of fresh coffee and a note scrawled in looping handwriting. "Eat first, think later, Maggie." For a moment, Allison just stared at the note, the words blurring. No one had shown her kindness in a long time without expecting something in return. No strings, no sideways pitying glances, just human decency. It unsettled her more than it should have. She rubbed her eyes, stretched, and tried to smooth down her hair, aware she probably looked like she'd fought a tornado and lost. The diner buzzed with morning regulars, ranch hands in muddy jeans, older couples sipping black coffee from mismatched mugs, high school kids giggling over plates of pancakes before the first bell. Life went on, even when yours felt like it had stopped. As she nibbled cautiously at a cinnamon roll, sticky, warm, and almost painfully sweet, she felt someone slide into the booth across from her. It was the man from the night before, Sam Carter. Up close, she noticed more details. The faint scar on his right eyebrow, the calluses on his hands, the weary but steady look in his hazel eyes. He wore a dark gray hoodie under a worn canvas jacket, jeans tucked into heavy work boots. Everything about him screamed someone used to hard labor, someone who didn't waste words or trust easily. For a long second, they just looked at each other. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly. More like two people recognizing the same bruises in each other. Finally, Sam broke the silence. "You got somewhere to stay?" he asked gruffly, his voice low but not unkind. Allison stiffened, instinctively defensive. "I'm fine," she lied too quickly. Sam just raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Fine usually doesn't sleep in diners clutching a suitcase," he said. Then after a pause he added, "Maggie told me a little. Not everything, just enough to know you're stuck." Allison bristled. She didn't want to be anyone's charity case. She didn't want to owe anyone anything. "I'm not looking for handouts," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. Sam nodded slowly, as if he understood that reaction all too well. "Neither am I offering one," he said. "I'm offering a job." That caught her off guard. "A job?" She blinked at him, suspicious. This was the kind of setup you heard about on true crime podcasts. Desperate girl takes job offer from stranger, disappears forever. Sam must have seen the wariness on her face because he actually cracked a faint, tired smile. "Relax. Not that kind of job," he said. "I run a small horse ranch out by Miller's Bluff. It's about 20 minutes outside town. Could use an extra hand. Cleaning stalls, feeding, basic maintenance. Nothing fancy. Hard work, but honest." Allison hesitated, her mind racing. She knew exactly nothing about horses beyond what she'd seen in movies. She wasn't strong. She wasn't farm tough. She was a burned-out barista who couldn't even save her own coffee house. She must have looked doubtful because Sam added, "I'm not expecting miracles. Just someone who shows up, tries hard, doesn't quit the first time something smells bad." It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even close to the life she had dreamed of when she was 17, doodling business plans in the margins of her history notes. But it was something. It was a way to stop falling. Still, years of bad luck and broken trust made her wary. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Sam's eyes were steady. "Everyone deserves one good chance," he said. "Figured maybe it's your turn." Those simple words cracked something open inside her, something fragile, something she had kept buried under layers of bitterness and exhaustion. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "When would I start?" she asked. Sam shrugged. "Today, if you want." Allison glanced down at her coffee, the cinnamon roll half eaten on her plate. Outside the diner's big windows, the streets of Willow Creek glistened under a watery sun, washed clean by the storm. She could say no. She could disappear. She could let the shame win, let the fear keep her small and stuck. Or she could take the chance. She looked up at Sam and nodded. She said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm in." Sam offered a rare, genuine smile, the kind that made you think maybe, just maybe, he knew exactly what it felt like to lose everything and still get back up. "Meet me out front in 10 minutes, he said, standing. "We'll pick up some gear for you on the way." And just like that, Allison Turner, homeless, heartbroken, defeated, took her first step into a life she hadn't dared to believe she could still have. The road ahead would be rough. It would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in a long time, hope stirred in her chest. Not a blazing fire. Not yet. Just a spark. But sometimes, a spark is enough to start a whole new life. The truck's tires crunched over the gravel road as they left the sleepy town behind. Willow Creek shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just a handful of rooftops stitched into the horizon. Allison sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Sam's battered Ford F-150, the seatbelt frayed and the heater blasting stale, dusty air at her feet. Her palms were sweaty despite the chill, and she clutched her old canvas bag like a lifeline. The farther they drove, the louder her doubts became. What the hell was she doing? Sam, for his part, didn't press her with questions. He just focused on the road, one hand lightly resting on the steering wheel, the other drumming a slow rhythm against his thigh. The radio played a country station, faint static, old heartbreak songs that somehow fit the mood a little too perfectly. After about 15 minutes, the town gave way to open fields and dense patches of pine forest. Here and there, weathered barns leaned into the wind, and faded American flags fluttered over sagging porches. It was a slice of real, raw America, the kind you didn't see much on TV anymore. Finally, Sam turned onto a dirt driveway framed by a crooked wooden fence. A faded sign hanging from the gate read, "Willow Creek Stables." The ranch wasn't much to look at. Several large pastures stretched out on either side, some dotted with grazing horses, their coats slick from the rain. A long, low barn painted peeling red sat at the heart of the property, its tin roof rattling in the breeze. A modest two-story farmhouse with sagging shutters leaned tiredly against the rising sun. Allison exhaled slowly. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the fresh start she had once imagined. The shiny apartments, the trendy coffee shops, the curated Instagram life. But it was real. Sam parked the truck and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You don't have to stay," he said finally, breaking the heavy silence. Allison turned to him. There was no judgment in his tone, no guilt-tripping, just a simple truth. The door was open, but she had to walk through it herself. She tightened her grip on her bag. "No," she said, "I'm staying." Sam nodded once, satisfied, and hopped out. They spent the next hour gathering supplies. Sam outfitted her with a pair of worn work boots that were a half size too big, a heavy canvas jacket, and a pair of leather gloves that still smelled faintly of horses and liniment oil. He showed her the basics: how to muck a stall without breaking your back, how to toss hay into feeders, how to refill water troughs without flooding the barn aisle. "It ain't rocket science," he said with a lopsided grin, "but it's honest." And honest was something Allison hadn't felt in a long time. By mid-afternoon, she was sore, filthy, and smelled like a mixture of mud, manure, and hay. Her muscles screamed in protest every time she lifted a pitchfork or dragged a wheelbarrow, but weirdly, she didn't hate it. There was something almost meditative about the work, something grounding. As she scrubbed out a water bucket, she heard a soft whinny behind her. She turned to see a chestnut mare poking her head over the stall door, her large dark eyes calm and curious. "That's Rosie," Sam said, appearing beside her with a handful of carrots. "Gentlest soul you'll ever meet. Saved my ass more than once." He held out a carrot toward the horse, and after a moment's hesitation, Rosie nuzzled it from his hand. "Go ahead," Sam said, offering Allison another carrot. Tentatively, Allison held it out. Rosie sniffed her fingers, then plucked the carrot delicately, her lips tickling Allison's palm. She laughed, an actual genuine laugh that startled her with how unfamiliar it felt. Sam smiled too, a real one this time, not the guarded half-smirk he usually wore. "See? You're a natural." For the first time in what felt like years, Allison believed, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken beyond repair. As the sun dipped low and painted the fields in gold, Sam led her toward the farmhouse. "You can crash in the guest room upstairs," he said. "It's not fancy, but the roof doesn't leak much." Inside, the house was cozy but clearly lived in. The floors creaked with every step, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. Photographs lined the walls, black and white pictures of horses, snapshots of rodeos, a few grainy family portraits. Sam's past was all over this place, woven into the very bones of the house. As he showed her the guest room, a small space with a sagging bed, a battered dresser, and a quilt that smelled of lavender and sunshine, Allison felt something shift inside her. Not quite belonging, not yet, but the faintest echo of it. Later that night, as she lay awake listening to the wind whisper through the trees outside, her mind wouldn't stop racing. She thought about the friends who had vanished when her life fell apart, about the family that had given up on her long before she gave up on herself, about the dreams she had buried so deep she barely remembered what they looked like. And she thought about Sam, the stranger who had seen her at rock bottom and hadn't flinched. Maybe, she thought, some strangers weren't strangers at all. Maybe they were the bridges you crossed to get back to yourself. She closed her eyes, the exhaustion finally pulling her under. Tomorrow would be another long day. Tomorrow would be another chance to fight for the life she thought she had lost. And this time, Allison Turner wasn't planning on running. Not anymore. Morning came with a heavy gray sky pressing low over Willow Creek. The kind of sky that promised trouble. Allison woke to the distant rumble of thunder, her body aching in places she didn't even know had muscles. She sat up slowly, wincing as she stretched, the faded quilt slipping off her shoulders. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the house breathe, the creak of old wood, the soft patter of rain against the windows. In a strange way, it was comforting. Like the house itself was alive and whispering, "You're safe. For now." She pulled on her work boots and jacket, grabbed the battered Braves cap Sam had loaned her, and headed downstairs. In the kitchen, Sam was already up, nursing a mug of black coffee and flipping pancakes on the griddle. The smell of butter and syrup filled the room, making her stomach rumble. "Mornin'," he said without looking up. "You're just in time. Got a busy one today." Allison poured herself a cup of coffee, her fingers wrapping around the chipped ceramic like it was a lifeline. "What's on the agenda?" she asked, voice still rough with sleep. "Fence needs mending," he said. "Horses spooked last night. Might have been the storm rolling in or something else." Something else. The word sent a shiver down her spine. Out here, away from the comfort of cities and streetlights, something else could mean a lot of things. Coyotes, bears, or worse, people. Sam didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. She had learned quickly that Sam Granger was a man who measured his words carefully. If he thought she needed to know more, he'd tell her. After breakfast, they geared up. Thick canvas jackets, tool belts slung low on their hips, coils of wire and heavy hammers in hand. The rain had picked up to a steady drizzle, turning the dirt paths into slick mud. By the time they reached the far pasture, their boots were caked and their jeans soaked through. The fence was worse than they thought. Several posts were snapped clean in two, like something or someone had barreled through with purpose. Sam crouched low, inspecting the ground. "No hoofprints," he muttered. "No tracks at all. Just broken wood and a whole lot of unanswered questions." Allison swallowed hard. "You think it was an animal?" she asked. Sam's eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the tree line. "Maybe," he said. But the tightness in his jaw told a different story. They worked in silence, replacing posts, tightening wire, reinforcing the gates. The kind of labor that left no room for thinking, just the steady rhythm of hammering and hauling, the cold bite of rain on their necks. Still, even as she lost herself in the work, Allison couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And when the pickup truck rumbled down the driveway later that afternoon, kicking up gravel and muddy water, the feeling only grew stronger. A man stepped out. He wore a state trooper's uniform, the kind that immediately made Allison's heart hammer painfully in her chest. Even though she hadn't done anything wrong, old instincts died hard. The trooper was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and time. His nameplate read, Marshall. He tipped his hat at Sam. He said by way of greeting, "Marshall," Sam said, crossing his arms over his chest. "What brings you out here?" The trooper's gaze flicked to Allison, and something in his expression shifted. Not suspicion exactly, but curiosity. "Got some trouble down the highway," Marshall said. "Couple of break-ins at the gas station and the old mill. Figured I'd check in, make sure everything's all right out here." Sam's jaw tensed. "We're good," he said. "Just a busted fence. Horses are fine." Marshall nodded slowly, but he didn't seem convinced. He lingered, his eyes scanning the barn, the pasture, the farmhouse. "You got any new folks staying here?" he asked casually. Sam didn't even blink. "Nope," he said, "just me." Allison felt her stomach twist into knots. She wasn't sure what scared her more, that the law might come poking around into her past, or that Sam would lie so easily to protect her. After a few more pleasantries, the trooper climbed back into his truck and rolled away, leaving a trail of muddy water in his wake. Sam waited until he was gone before he turned to Allison. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "We need to talk." The weight of his words hit her like a punch. Inside the house, Sam poured them each another mug of coffee, his movements slower now, more deliberate. "Look," he said, meeting her eyes across the scarred wooden table. "I didn't ask before because I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." Allison's throat tightened. "Now?" he continued. "You need to be straight with me, Allison. Because if trouble's coming, I gotta know what we're dealing with." She stared down into her coffee, watching the swirl of cream and liquid brown like it held some kind of answer. How could she explain a lifetime of bad choices in a few sentences? How could she tell him that the past wasn't just something she'd left behind? It was something that would always chase her, like a storm she could never quite outrun? Her hands trembled as she set the mug down. "I'm not who you think I am," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms again. "Start talking," he said. "From the beginning." Outside, the rain turned heavier, drumming against the tin roof like a warning. And inside, for the first time in years, Allison Turner prepared to tell the truth. The whole messy, broken truth. Whether Sam, or anyone else, would stick around after hearing it was a question she wasn't ready to face yet. But the storm wasn't waiting. And neither was her past. The rain kept pounding against the house like 1,000 tiny fists as Allison sat at the kitchen table, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sam waited, patient but unyielding, the kind of stillness that said he wasn't going anywhere until he got answers. She drew in a shaky breath and began. "I wasn't born Allison Turner," she said, her voice low. "My real name is—" Sam didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't shift in his seat, just nodded once, encouraging her to keep going. "I grew up outside of Tulsa. Dirt poor. Mom worked 2 jobs. Dad wasn't around much. When he was, we wished he wasn't." Her mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "By the time I was 16, I was already running with the wrong crowd. Boys with fast cars and fast fists. Girls who knew how to pick locks and lie with a smile." The rain softened to a steady murmur, like even the storm was leaning closer to listen. "At 17, I made the worst mistake of my life." She hesitated, the words clawing at her throat. "There was a job, a break-in, supposed to be easy, grab some cash, some jewelry, in and out. But it went bad, real bad." She closed her eyes, forcing herself to relive it. The guy was home. There was a struggle. He didn't make it. A long silence stretched between them. Sam didn't speak. He just waited, letting her find her footing. "I didn't pull the trigger," she said, opening her eyes again. "But I was there, and when the cops came knocking, nobody wanted to take the fall, so they pointed at me, said I planned it." She shrugged helplessly. "I was scared. I ran. Changed my name, dyed my hair, started over in every podunk town that didn't ask too many questions. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. And every time I thought I was safe, that I could breathe, something would happen. Someone would recognize me, or rumors would start, or the nightmares would get too loud, so I'd pack up and move again. Sam leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. And the trooper today? Allison nodded. It's not random. They're looking for me again. Somehow they figured out I was nearby. Maybe it was the diner, maybe someone saw my photo. I don't know. But if they're here, they're close. Sam rubbed a hand over his jaw, thoughtful. You didn't pull that trigger, he said finally. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Allison felt her throat tighten. Doesn't matter, she whispered. To them, I'm guilty either way. For a long moment, the only sound was the creaking of the old farmhouse settling under the weight of the storm. Finally, Sam stood, walking over to the window. He stared out into the rain, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. You know, he said almost casually, this place, it's a hell of a lot tougher than it looks. He turned back to her, his eyes sharp and sure. So are you. Something inside Allison cracked then, not broken like before, but opened. Hope. Fragile and unfamiliar. I'm not asking you to stick your neck out for me, she said quickly. I can pack up tonight, I can be gone by. Sam shook his head once. You're not running anymore, he said. Not from this. Allison stared at him, uncomprehending. You helped me fix my land, fix my fences, he said. Now it's my turn. He moved to the coat rack, grabbing his oilskin duster. If they're coming for you, he said, they're gonna have to go through me first. Outside, the storm intensified, rattling the windows, shaking the trees. But inside the old farmhouse, a new kind of storm was brewing. One built not on fear, but on the stubborn, unyielding grit of two battered souls who had finally found something worth standing for. Allison pushed to her feet, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Determination. Maybe the past was a monster with teeth and claws. Maybe it would catch her in the end, but not tonight. Tonight, she had a fighting chance. She met Sam's steady gaze and nodded. Let's finish this, she said, because running had never really saved her. Maybe fighting back would. The old farmhouse was silent, save for the creak of floorboards as Allison and Sam prepared for what was coming. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a thick mist crawling over the fields like a living thing. It was the kind of night that smelled of earth, gun oil, and unfinished business. Sam checked the shotgun once more, snapping it shut with a clean, practiced motion. He handed a second weapon, a battered Colt revolver, to Allison. She hesitated, the weight of it heavy in her hand. I haven't fired one of these since, she started, but Sam cut her off with a calm look. You'll remember when it counts. The clock on the wall ticked louder than seemed possible. 9:42 p.m. Sam killed the porch light, plunging them into a cocoon of shadow. They waited. Every tick of the clock felt like a drumbeat inside Allison's ribs. She tried to slow her breathing, tried to steady her thoughts, but every sound, the hoot of an owl, the distant snap of a branch, made her flinch. And then, the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. A black SUV rolled slowly up the long driveway, headlights off. It stopped halfway up the drive, engine humming low, malevolent. Two men stepped out, dark clothes, confident movements. Not cops, bounty hunters. One had a radio clipped to his vest, the other carried a sidearm, holstered but loose. Sam's voice was a whisper at her ear. Remember what you told me. You didn't pull the trigger then. Don't pull it now, unless you have no choice. Allison nodded, clutching the revolver so tight her knuckles ached. They waited, hidden in the deep shadows of the porch. The first man called out, voice oily and smug. Katie Reynolds, we know you're in there. Step out nice and easy, and maybe we'll talk about cutting you a deal. Sam muttered, typical, always selling mercy they don't have. The second man circled the truck, pulling something from the back seat, a set of cuffs, glinting in the moonlight. Allison's heart raced. Every instinct screamed at her to bolt, to run into the fields, to disappear. But she stayed, rooted not by fear this time, but by something stronger. Resolve. Sam squeezed her shoulder lightly. A promise. They were in this together. Last chance. The first man barked. You come out now or we come in. Sam stepped out first, calm as Sunday morning. You're trespassing, he said, voice carrying across the misty yard. This is private property. The bounty hunter laughed. This is bigger than your damn property rights, cowboy. The second man started toward the porch. That's when Sam cocked the shotgun. A hard, unmistakable sound. Both men froze. I said, Sam repeated, voice low and full of steel. This is private property. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a flick of his wrist, the first man motioned, and everything exploded into chaos. The second man lunged forward, drawing his gun. Sam fired, the shotgun blast tearing through the air like thunder. The man dropped, weapons skittering across the gravel. The first hunter swore, ducking behind the SUV, returning fire blindly. Allison dropped low, heart hammering, adrenaline drowning every coherent thought. Sam reloaded swiftly, movements sharp and efficient. But the first hunter was smart. He stayed covered, calling into his radio for backup. We've got shots fired. Repeat, shots fired. Suspect is armed. His voice crackled across the night. Sam cursed under his breath. We gotta end this. Fast. Allison's mind raced. She thought about every town she had fled, every night spent looking over her shoulder. Not anymore. Cover me, she said. Before Sam could argue, she slipped off the porch, melting into the mist. She circled wide, moving silent as a shadow through the tall grass. The bounty hunter was so focused on Sam he never saw her coming. She reached the SUV, crouched low, heart in her throat. And then, she saw it. Keys dangling from the ignition. Without a second thought, she jumped in, slammed the door, and jammed the gear into reverse. The SUV screeched backward, tires spitting gravel. The bounty hunter spun, caught between Sam's shotgun and Allison barreling toward him in a 2-ton battering ram. He dove out of the way, straight into Sam's waiting fists. One punch, brutal, efficient, and the man crumpled to the ground. Silence fell again, broken only by Allison's ragged breathing. She climbed out of the SUV, legs trembling. Sam stood over the unconscious bounty hunter, the shotgun resting easily on his shoulder. He looked at Allison, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. Not bad for a girl who hasn't fired a gun in years, he said. Allison laughed, a wild, relieved sound. Thanks, she said, but I think I'm done running other people over for a while. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sam's face sobered. We don't have long. He pulled out his phone, tapped a quick message, and tossed it into the weeds. Backup plan? Something like that, he said, grabbing a duffel from inside the farmhouse. He handed it to her, cash, IDs, a burner phone. You helped save my land, he said quietly. Least I can do is buy you a little head start. Allison's throat tightened. You don't have to do this. Sam shrugged, easy and unbothered. You don't have to run anymore either, but you're gonna need a clean slate. She looked at him, really looked, the stubborn tilt of his jaw, the kindness behind the toughness. A good man. A rare thing in her world. She slung the duffel over her shoulder. I'll come back someday, when it's safe. Sam smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. I'll keep the light on for you. The sirens grew louder, flashing lights slicing through the mist. Allison slipped into the woods, disappearing into the darkness just as the first police cruiser roared up the drive. And for the first time in a long, long time, she wasn't running from her past. She was running toward her future.